Alright everyone, I realize this is a bit of a different video, but I feel that, due to the upcoming Max Hell Frog Warrior review, you might need some context for some things. This is also true for future reviews of Zen films, and if you're wondering what I'm talking about, it all revolves around a man named Scott Shaw. First things first, this is not meant as an attack video. This is meant as a way to help you understand why these films are like they are and the person behind them. Now, Donald G. Jackson was as much involved with a lot of these productions as Shaw was, but he's not the focus at the moment. I guess I should begin with explaining who Scott Shaw is. Well, one fateful day in the past, Donald G. Jackson, director of the Frogtown and Rollerblade series, was given a headshot of Scott carrying two samurai swords, which inspired him to call him up to ask if he'd star in his next film. That project fell through, but that fateful day, a friendship was forged that stood the test of time and created an entirely new method of filmmaking. Before we get into Zen filmmaking, however, here's who Scott Shaw is, as far as I could surmise. Shaw is simultaneously the most awesome and infuriating person who is alive today, or at least that I've read about recently. Nicknamed Dr. Shaw by absolutely no one, he's also known as DJ Acid X, Jake Blade, Jake Dharma, and several other things, most of which are pseudonyms he takes on for editing and doing soundtracks. The dude teaches courses on filmmaking, he has a beach house in Japan, he's traveled to practically every country, he's an author, actor, artist, filmmaker, journalist, composer, photographer, painter, certified yoga instructor, and swami. I may have missed the part in the reading where he became a genie, I'm not sure. Oh, did I mention? I read two of his filmmaking books, Zen Filmmaking and Independent Filmmaking, Secrets of the Craft, which I'll be quoting quite a bit here. In addition to all of this, he's a black belt in Korean Hapkido, Taekwondo, and Aikijitsu, and out of those three things, I'm sure I've horribly mispronounced at least one. But he's been doing martial arts since he was 6, hence his start in the film industry. Basically, he's the kid who did everything he ever wanted to. You know when a 6-year-old is like, I'm gonna be a ninja one day! And you laugh it off because, whatever, he's not gonna be a ninja. Well, that's Shaw, except he took all of his aspirations and said, fuck it, I'm gonna be a ninja. Although he may not actually be a ninja, I don't know. But above all else, he's been greatly influenced by Buddhist, Hindu, and Sufi teachings, which is reflected in his film work. I don't know anything about his personal life outside of what he's written in the 2 books I read or what I found on his website, so the focus here is on what he's accomplished in the film industry. That being said, Shaw hates the film industry. Or to put it more like he would, he thinks it's bullshit. You'll find that's a running theme with Shaw. He thinks a lot of things are bullshit. It started because he grew up in Hollywood and went to Hollywood high school with a lot of relatives of the stars, which made him quite jaded to the Hollywood lifestyle. As he states in his books many times, everyone is coming to Hollywood to make it big. And he thinks that's bullshit. What he really wants to do is create films with a meaning, to make them artsy, but at the same time, they make absolutely no sense. But the thing that confuses me isn't that he's trying to make art films, it's that, to the untrained eye, he appears to just be making films that aren't put together very well. It's not really innovative or new, it's just confusing mostly. This is Zen Filmmaking, which Shaw created himself, and its origin goes like so. Shaw and Jackson were collaborating on a sequel to Rollerblade called The Rollerblade 7, and they decided that traditional filmmaking would not work in this case. So they threw out the script and started filming improv scenes and pieced the movie together that way. Shaw saw this innovative process and was inspired, describing the moment like so. "This is like Zen," I exclaimed one day. "This is Zen filmmaking." That was it. So in essence, Zen filmmaking is shooting a film without a script, in order to let the actors and story flow more organically. An outline of the general story is made up, and the actors are described a scene, which they then act out on their own. This doesn't sound that bad, in theory, except the execution leaves a lot to be desired, as you'll discover when I finally start reviewing a Zen film. A lot of the scenes don't make sense when they're put together, some of it's laughably bad, and at other times it's infuriating. To get an idea of what I'm talking about, watch Pocket Ninjas. That's a Zen film, which involves Shaw in some unknown capacity. If you saw my review, you know what I'm talking about. But you can't fault someone for wanting to create art, right? especially if they're so passionate about it, because, hey, if they cared about it, maybe we should too. Except, and one of the reasons I'm creating this video, there seems to be a lack of respect for the people involved, and a lot of, as Shaw would say, ego. And it brings a lot more dimension to these films than I thought was possible. So let's go over this step by step. Here's Shaw's own words on Zen filmmaking. This does not mean that Zen filmmaking has no foundational elements, or that Zen filmmaking is simply an intellectual notion based upon the ideal of stringing together a radical mishmash of abstract elements, ultimately leading to the creation of a film that makes no sense. No, Zen filmmaking is a formalized style of filmmaking. Just as the Zen understanding of enlightenment teaches us that though you may meditate for years, it is not until the moment you step beyond your thinking mind and realize that you are already enlightened that you achieve Satori. Thus, if you acutely plan your productions, with screenplays, storyboards, and locations, there is no room for the instantaneousness of cinematic enlightenment to occur, and you will always be lost between the way your mind desires a scene to be and the way it actually turns out. Ultimately, in Zen filmmaking, nothing is desired, and thus, all outcomes are perfect. So basically, there are no mistakes in Zen filmmaking. Except, in my opinion, there are mistakes. Everything has mistakes. Shaw even admits in the book that the Rollerblade 7 only turned out the way it did because they lost the audio and had to get artsy with it. And you can cover up mistakes, sure, but nothing is perfect just because you say you have no expectations. That's just settling for what you have. Take this, for example. This has become a music video world where anything is acceptable. There are so many things you can do with your computer to alter the color, contrast, and sound of your film that there is no reason to be disappointed in anything you have filmed. You simply need to be willing to change your expectations. In fact, this is one of the primary tenets of Zen filmmaking: accept what you receive. No longer are you, the filmmaker, damned to refilming scenes that were perhaps poorly lighted. Instead, you can simply integrate the uncommon lighting of a scene into the overall presentation of your film and simply allow it to help define the artistic nature of your movie. In essence, everything is okay. You can do anything you want and present it as film art. And here's what really gets me. Shaw uses the fact that it's art as an excuse to escape criticism, but just saying something is art doesn't mean there aren't mistakes. Art isn't just what you settle with, it's what you create. And if you want to make something cool and out there, it isn't as simple as changing the lighting because one scene was lit improperly. You have to set out there with a vision, do everything purposefully and with conviction, and I don't believe this is the case here. In fact, Shaw uses footage from unfinished films to pad out new ones, regardless of whether the story relates to it or not. But what's the artistic message there? It isn't filmed differently, it isn't presented with something to say, it's just there. And by calling it art, Shaw thinks the work is beyond criticism. But don't let me speak for him. Here's what he himself has to say about critics. It is important for you, the filmmaker, to understand that these are small-minded people who criticize everything if it is outside of the norm. As I always state, what is a film critic? With few exceptions, they are people who do not have the talent or the dedication to make a movie. What I also say to these small-minded individuals who do not understand film art and attempt to attack my films is, I'm an artist. I don't have to rationalize, justify, or defend anything that I do. We all like what we like and don't like what we don't like. That is life. But, as is the case with all other forms of art, film art stands free from the definitions of like and dislike. Many of the people who write these reviews have never actually made a film and are jealous of people who have. So, let me ask you a question. If someone just shit on a canvas and asked you what you thought of it, because it's art, does that mean you can't have an opinion on it? Of course not. That's like saying you can't choose your favorite breakfast cereal. No one is right or wrong in their opinion on if they like or dislike something. As an artist, it's up to you to defend your work, but you can't nullify someone's opinions on it. You just have to create something you're happy with. Nothing is beyond criticism, especially if you put it out there for people to buy and watch. If the audience isn't expected to have an opinion, then why are they watching it? And just saying a critic is jealous of you is trying to pin the blame on them rather than your work. You don't have to make films to know how you feel about one, the same as you don't have to make clothing to know that shirt looks hideous on you. And speaking of pinning the blame on someone else, Shaw likes to do that a lot too. Despite all outcomes being perfect, he's pretty clear on the fact that other people are the cause of most of his problems. On actors. It is you, the filmmaker, who must put out a casting notice and then finally decide upon which talent to cast for your film. And I use the term talent very loosely. The problems with casting a film are numerous. At the root of many, if not most of these problems, is the actor. Acting is not an art form like painting, where the artist continually hones his skills to present the most idealized example of the art he has in his mind. No, it is about ego. It is about gaining fame. Another method of falsehood is hiring what are known as name actors. A filmmaker goes to a person who has some level of notoriety, they hire them for a day, put them in the film, and then place their name foremost in the cast. The reality is, however, there's a group of name actors in Hollywood who once had respected careers. As their star began to fade, however, they entered the world of indie films and have performed in a plethora of low and no-budget movies. Though their name may be known, due to the numerous poorly produced films they've been in since, their name or their performances means virtually nothing to potential sales. Oh yes, casting name actors, something that Shaw and Jackson were known to do sometimes. In fact, they frequently collaborated with their friends Joe Estevez, Robert Z'Dar, and Conrad Brooks, all of which helped their sales because they're B-movie legends. Not necessarily because they're being used, but because that's what they're good at. But also these guys were friends, which is the main reason they worked together and still do. Here's what Donald G. Jackson had to say of actors in general, and Conrad Brooks specifically. That's from A Little Bit About What's Going On, a 50-minute rant by Jackson where he talks to people I don't know and mostly talks about nothing in particular. The first bit of it is just testing the microphone. This is one of the documentaries Shaw put out after Jackson passed away, but there's no editing and no message to speak of, making me wonder what it is being documented. I also watched a documentary they did called Frogtown News in hopes that I could be enlightened a little bit on who Jackson was, but I found little to no real information there. The whole thing is Jackson walking around a convention with a riveting frog toy he plays over people he's talking to, which is almost always telling them about how this actress with him does nudity. This is spliced between footage taken from a TV interview they did about Guns of El Chupacabra, which was already released when Frogtown News came out, and an interview with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles co-creator Kevin Eastman and his wife Julie Strain, which is done at someone's house, complete with talking in the background and other distractions. The most interesting thing about this documentary is when Eastman talks about working on a fourth Ninja Turtles movie, but even then, this has nothing to do with the footage of Jackson at the convention. It eventually just dissolves into the guests interviewing the interviewer. Who is he? I don't know, but apparently he's never seen any Phantasm movies. On actresses! I cannot tell you how many times I've called an actress into an audition and could not even confirm with 100% certainty that the person sitting in front of me was the individual in the photograph. I commonly say to them, "Wow, I would really like to meet the girl in this picture," but for the most part, they are so vain that they do not even get the joke. In some cases, in my earlier days, I have torn up their headshot right in front of them, but I have learned to become more kind as the years have progressed. It is easier to find a talented male actor as opposed to finding a talented female actress. I suppose there are numerous psychological reasons for this. Girls tend to be more vain. Every guy they meet tells them that they are beautiful, and once in the industry, they are promised stardom. Whatever the ultimate logic for this case scenario is, you will find, as a filmmaker, that it is much easier to find a male actor who really knows his chops rather than a female actress. Plus, male actors bring far less ego and problems to a set. On crew members. I find most problems that occur on the set are from incompetent crew members. The sad thing is, at the low/no budget level, you sometimes have to work with crew people who are just not very good. The people who really tick me off are bad cameramen. Most of the so-called DPs come on board full of promises and then they film the movie like shit. Cameramen, as everyone else in the filmmaking process, have egos. On scripts. As we jokingly say in Zen Filmmaking, scripts are for sissies. On film school is for sissies. On acting coaches. Remember, those you can, do. Those you can't, teach. So, an acting teacher is at the bottom of the food chain, attempting to gain self-worth, power, and leverage. With very few exceptions, they are people who have come to Hollywood and have attempted to make it. When they did not, they somehow landed a gig as an acting instructor. Most acting coaches are jealous of anyone who has actually been offered a role. From this, they talk their student out of accepting it. On acting students. People who study acting at an acting school are not actors. They're just fooling themselves. Actors act in films, not with the same few people on a weekly basis in some stupid class. I believe studying the craft of acting is the most important thing any actor can do. Actually, I'm just joking with you. I don't believe you can train someone to act. On if he watches other Indian B movies. Oh no, not at all. I hate those kind of films. On storylines. Zen Filmmaking teaches the concept of the anti-story. Fuck the story. Who cares? I'm just not into making a feature that has this perfectly scripted storyline. If you want to see something like that, go and watch some romantic, boring love junk that was filmed for $50 million. Unquestionable business practices. I never attempt to make a person anything other than what they are, because by doing this, you are asking people to actually be able to act. If I want to cast a junkie, I hire someone who has or used to have a drug problem. If I want to cast a gangbanger, I hire someone who used to be in a gang or at least grew up in an area where gangs were prevalent. Zen Filmmaking is anti-film permit. The problem with obtaining filming permits is that you are locked into one location and cannot easily move or shift your productions if the inspiration strikes. But if you do not tell the local authorities that you are going to film at these locations, then you can usually get away with it as long as you keep your cast and crew small. If some figure of authority approaches you and asks what you are doing, never tell them you are making a film. The minute you mention the words film, they assume you have money. Tell them you are making a birthday video. What is a birthday video? I don't know. But neither will they. If you think that people who were inadvertently included in your movie are going to get angry with you once your film is released, this is generally not the case. Most people dream about being a part of Hollywood, and you are offering them an opportunity that they never even saw coming. You can only buy blanks if you have a permit. As our production team possessed no permits, we bought real bullets. Thus, all the semi-automatic pistols, AR-15s, AK-47s, and shotguns which are used in this film are loaded with live rounds. Hey, blanks mess up the barrel of a gun anyway. On paying others. Jokingly, I often tell my actors when they ask me how much they will be paid to be in one of my films, pay you? Why should I pay you? How much are you going to pay me to put you in one of my movies? In reality, this is how I feel. If you are making a movie, it is you who must take on all of the responsibility. All an actor has to do is show up on the set, give you a few hours, and spit out a few lines. Though this is the case, few actors understand this logic, and many expect to be paid for their time. What I commonly explain to actors who are seeking payment for their work is that their name means nothing to the sale of the film. You must explain to your actors and actresses that what you are giving them is the chance to be in an actual film, and that should be payment enough. Whatever players are available and willing to be cool and hang out and buy their own food, they are the ones that get the bigger parts and get the story told. Another interesting occurrence, which happens with cameramen in the indie industry, is that they want to get paid by any means possible. Some bands may want money for you to use their music, but it is better to not go in this direction with your arrangement. On paying himself. Film distributors will create costs that never existed and claim that is why the filmmaker is due no monetary compensation. They will shortchange or completely disavow any payments due to the filmmaker, and this is just the short list. Are you going to see a dime from any of the sales they make? It is very doubtful. They take the creative work of others, sell it, and keep the money. Notice the change there? When it's his money on the line, it's quite different, and I think that's part of what fascinates me about him. Because sure, a filmmaker does a ton of work and puts the movie together, but a movie is always a sum of the parts that make it up. It's never a one-person show, and everyone works hard to get their job done. And that's exactly what it is, a job. Actors are working, and they deserve to be paid for what they do, regardless of experience. You don't see any other job where someone just starting out doesn't get paid for their time or effort, even if they're the most incompetent person in the world. And look, I say this as someone who's acted, it's difficult. It's very hard to put out a believable performance, and I respect actors who are good at their craft. Saying actors just show up on set to spit out lines is not only a disservice to what they do, but an insult toward people who are creating an art just like Shaw says he does. But let's move the topic forward and bring the video to a close. The real reason I enjoy reading Shaw's books and watching these movies is the strange relationship he had with Donald G. Jackson. Because these two collaborated together a lot, and they seem like they were close friends, but from what I read in Shaw's books, they might as well have hated each other. Shaw thought Jackson was going to constantly hijack his productions, and Jackson once hired a bodyguard to protect him because he intensely distrusted Shaw and everyone on that particular movie. Jackson was in an altercation during the filming of Rock and Roll Cops that ended with him being strangled in a hotel room, and Shaw just watched it happen to see how it would play out. There were stories in these books about Jackson yelling at and threatening cast and crew, and one strange incident where he insisted upon making up for it by buying someone 4 plates of french fries. This ended with him screaming and throwing a sandwich across the restaurant because the cook accidentally put a tomato on it. I can't make this stuff up. By all accounts, Jackson seemed like a very angry man, frustrated with how things were turning out and plagued by constant hip pain and other health problems. On the flip side, it seemed like Shaw was pretty laid back and very calmly distrusted him. And yet, I find myself rooting for these two and their hackneyed ideas. I'm jealous of their epic bromance. And truthfully, there's a portion of the Zen Filmmaking book that touched me a little bit. It's an interview from 2008, in which the person asking the questions inquires if Shaw considered Jackson his mentor. Creatively, we were an equal team. But when I first met Don, he certainly had much more experience in the independent film industry than I did. So, in that regard, yes, it is true. In fact, when he was living the last few months of his life in the hospital, before he died, he would introduce me to all of his doctors and nurses as his son. So, I guess he viewed me as a son. I see the early time of our collaboration as Don was the technical end and I was the creative and spiritual side, as he would always turn to me for spiritual advice. Later in his life, he would always say about me, "The student has become the master." So make of that what you will. These two really were friends, very strange friends, and that is sometimes more interesting to me than the movies they produced. Not to say that the movies aren't entertaining, they are, but when you realize what was happening behind the scenes, it all makes a lot more and less sense. And in the end, are the movies supposed to make sense? Maybe, maybe not. But certainly they've all been memorable, and in that respect, Shaw and Jackson have succeeded in what they set out to do. So what do I conclude with? Well, I hope this helps everyone to understand things a bit more when I get to Max Hell and future Zen films, and I hope that it's a fun journey getting there. Shaw is nothing if not entertaining, and I've only just scratched the surface of what you're in store for. Hang on and buckle your seatbelts. It's gonna be a bumpy ride.